Today we're going to learn about externalities. So before we move on to externalities, I want to teach you what is an externality is all about. So this is a part of market failures. Actually, externality is something which you get affected without involving in the production process. So now, if I say, how do you get affected without involving in production process? It's very easy to understand. Let me take a chart for you to take it a bit seriously on this content. Give me a second. That is a bit slow, so I want you to adapt it. So starting from so now here you take a company. So I'll consider it as a company, and then this company has a polluting environment. This put some pollution to the environment. So there's a guy who's walking on the road. Okay. I'm not a good drawing person, but from my knowledge, I'm doing what I can. Now this guy is walking on the road, and all of a sudden this guy is getting some sort of smoke. So he feel irritated. He feels so upset. Now he's so concerned. Why this company is putting a lot of pollution to the environment? Now with this much concern, he is really getting affected without no reason. An externality happens when the person who is involved getting affected doesn't have any involvement with the organization, what it does. Now, example, this guy never purchased anything from this company, right? He never purchased anything, first thing. And also he didn't give anything to this company. But without purchasing anything, without consuming anything, you get affected on the market. We say it as negative externality, or you can say it as externality. So externality is like getting affected without no reasons. So now this guy is walking on the road, and all of a sudden he's getting affected, and he starts calling to this guy saying that I never expected this type of smoke will come as it's getting it's almost affecting me. Now this guy was neither involved in production or no involvement in consumption. But what happened? He got affected. So if a person is getting affected without not involving in the production process or in consumption, that particular party is coming under the term called third party. The third party who is getting affected with the company's production or consumption without involving, we say them as externality. So what is externality? Easy to understand. The third party who is getting affected without no involvement in production and no involvement in consumption. We say it as what? Externality. So did you understand the term externality? So this guy has never purchased anything from this company. Without purchasing anything from this company, he is getting affected in consumption and also in production. So if a person is getting affected without involvement in consumption and in production, we say it as externality. Now the guy who's getting affected is also known another name for this person. We say it as third party. So the exact term for externality, when a third party is getting affected without no involvement in production and no involvement in consumption, we say it as what? We say it as externality. Okay, so we move on to the next part. Now let me move on to the topic and explain it. You might see here, don't vaccinate my kids. Our support is spreading, but spreading for sure, and this person is getting affected. I'll explain what this example actually means. They might say something to the environment, they might show something to the environment, but actually that's not the real cause. If you don't vaccinate, see this person, he might have some other diseases. Now let's start explaining this particularly in deep manner. So it's a big area in your syllabus, and in your AS level, this is tested highly on your papers. So you need to know, you need to have overall knowledge when you are doing actually this particular area. So starting with the concern, externality defined. An externality is present when the activity of one entity, person, or firm directly affects the welfare of another entity in a way that is outside the market mechanism. So there are two externalities which can create. One is negative externalities. These activities damage on others. The smoke, which I said about, is about the damage which can happen to the environment. And if it is bringing something good to the environment, we say as positive externality. You take teaching as a job. Okay, so when someone is teaching, and the person who is learning out of the teaching is going to spread the same thing what they learn for others. So when they are spreading the same thing what they learned from one particular person to others, we say that's positive externality. So these activities benefits on others. So now you might see in positive externality and negative externality, there are a few examples I have given. When consuming or producing a good causes a benefit to third party, walking to work reduces congestion. So what does it mean actually? When you are walking on the road, you are not actually affecting to the any party on the road. You are not making traffics. So you are actually helping the entire society. So when you can bring something benefit to the society, that is what we say is positive externality, and you are not damaging any people around the market. So what positive externality says that when consuming or producing a good causes a benefit to a third party, because you are consuming a good, you are getting some sort of happiness to the entire environment. You take vaccination as a good example. If you get vaccinated, then of course the people who are next to you, they are also not getting COVID because you got vaccinated, so they are also safe. So by consuming your product, you are going to affect the other party. Then of course we say it as positive externality. But the other party never consumed the product, but still he gets a advantage out of it. If you study on time, you become a graduate one day. You start lecturing for people. The knowledge what I give you, you might also share to others. That is also a positive externality. You pay and consume the result. After paying and consuming it, you are trying to spread the results to others, but then this is a part of positive externality. Then we have negative externality. When consuming or producing a good causes a cost to a third party. Now, when you consume it, other party is getting affected. We take it as an example. Now you are taking there are people who consume cigarettes. There are people who consume alcohol, right? So when these people are actually having these type of things, the person who is next to the particular one will get affected. When a person is going on the bus, he smokes and he puffs the cigarette smoke in front of another person's face. This guy who is getting affected never had the smoke. He never wanted to, get affected, but actually is getting affected because the other one is smoking. So the person who is involved and getting affected is a person who would never expected to get affected. So when he is getting affected without involving in that particular part, but in a negative manner, we say there's negative externality. You might see air travel causes an increase in pollution. So the more they send rockets to Mars, the more pollution they can make. Do you know that when they send rockets to Mars, the entire world's carbon dioxide emission is emitted is just in one particular day. That's how the gas they create. So it's the entire world's gas they are creating in one day whenever they are launching a rocket to the environment. So that type of power of carbon dioxide will be generated, and it will affect the environment in that particular manner. Because they are sending rockets to NASA, because they are sending rockets to Moon or Mars, it doesn't mean that the people are getting affected in a good manner. They affect it in the bad manner also. The moment they find a place in Mars, then of course it's going to be a good way of affecting for the third parties. We have few charts for you to remember. Let me explain you how these charts work. So there are few charts you need to know. One we said as positive externality in consumption. Other one we said as positive externality in production. I want you to draw two of this because this is one of the important charts which the examiner requests you on your paper. So can you please copy this down? Then I'll explain you how it works. Demand and supply, right? How it works.
Yes. Yeah.
So now remember, when I was speaking about consumption, consumption is done by the consumers. Okay, so remember that. So when consumers are consuming the product, we need to consider two charts in demand. One is this particular chart, other one is this particular chart. So here you might see it's a D curve, and actually it's a demand curve that representing, and the D curve is increasing. So here they are representing an increase in graph. So what is increasing? D curve is increasing. But when you are seeing that there's SMB, I'll explain you these terms. Listen carefully. This is SMB and this is PMB. So now SMB and PMB means what? SMB means, let me write it. You can also write it. Social market benefit. And PMB means private market benefit. Now, when you consume a product, it is bring good advantages to the society than what you are consuming. We say that social market benefit is higher than the private market benefit. But why did I bring a cost curve here? You guys can see there's one particular thing. There is PMC and SMC, right? So now why did I bring this PMC, private market cost and social market cost? Let me write that also. The meaning PMC means private market cost. SMC means social market cost. So when I see this particular chart, what I can understand is one particular thing. When consumers are consuming the product, they are getting more benefit than them to the society. As I said, the vaccination, a good vaccination, a good lecturing, a good knowledge what you are getting, a good skills you are learning, a good experience you are sharing is a part of this particular thing. So we say you are consuming the product, but when you consume a product, there's a cost, right? When you don't consume it just freely. When you learn something, you don't feel you don't learn that free. So when you learn something free at free cost, you're actually incurring a cost. That's what we say supply. Supply comes with the cost. So when production comes with the cost, consumption takes place by a private individual. That's the reason here you can see supply and demand is intersecting. But because your consumption is bringing a good thing to the society, your chart is going front, and this is affecting the society in a greater way. Though it is costly to the environment, the society is actually receiving a good way of knowledge. Because now you consume this knowledge at this cost, the society is getting this much of knowledge. The difference between this and this, you see this chart, they're taking one line from here. This particular line is what we say dead weight loss. Let me explain you what is dead weight loss exactly. Now, when a person is consuming that, actually he is going to bring that knowledge to an entire society. He's going to provide it. For example, you learn, you paid me, you learn from me, then you take the knowledge, you go for a company, you teach them at free cost. So when you do that, what happens? You are learning it at a cost. First, you paid me. Then after that, you are giving to society. They didn't pay for this. So if they don't pay for this, the money what the supplier is losing here is the dead weight loss. So according to dead weight loss, when your private market benefit and your social market benefit is there, social market benefit exceeds the private market benefit. When SMB exceeds the PMB, positive externality in consumption can take place, but you will pay a price for it. But then what happens? The society who is getting that part will not pay a price. So the demand curve's difference is the dead weight loss. Did you understand this? You understood?
Yes.
Okay. So then we move on next part. Right, positive externality in production. Now, when I say consumption, I said you to remember demand curve, right? The same way, when I speak about production, I remind you to remember to the supply curve, because production starts with supply. The more they supply, the more production will happen. So here I have taken two curves, and you might see social market cost is lower than the private market cost. So when you're producing a product, you actually, when you're worried about society, you try to bring the cost as down as possible. Okay. So when you bring the cost as down as possible, because you don't want to affect the environment, you incur the cost for yourself. You will not worry about the cost, what happens to you when you are concerned about the social market cost. Give me a second. Point. Actually, so S is equal PMC, S is equal SMC. Now you might see here what actually has happened. Your private market cost is higher than your social market cost. What the reason? Let me zoom a bit so you'll have a good view on what I'm teaching. Okay, so what I was saying, actually your private market cost is lower than your social market, higher than your social market cost. Why these firms are incurring a higher cost when compared to social market cost? Because when they produce something, they don't want to affect their environment. That's their true nature. You take cream soda company in Sri Lanka. Cream soda company, Elephant House company is always getting the best certificate on providing the source, providing the goods with less pollution. That's the only company which is functioning in Sri Lanka with lowest level of pollution to the environment. What do they do? When they produce, they plant trees around the company. So when carbon dioxide is going outside, those trees can get those carbon dioxide and that will reduce the level of emission to the environment. So when they do that, actually, they have a lot of trees around that. So the factory is covered with full of trees. The reason they don't want the society to bear. So when they are serving the trees, the maintenance the trees, the cost will go up eventually than the society's cost. So when they provide it to society, they also try to give it a lower cost, but society is getting affected as less than the private market cost. So these people who are producing the product incurs a higher cost than the people who are consuming or who are getting affected. So the guy who will go and purchase the product, maybe cream soda, pays a higher price because now the cost is high because they are maintaining the entire environment. They're considering the society's effect. So when you consume it, the society doesn't get affected that much. So that difference between your private market cost and social market cost, what the cost the society is receiving, what at advantage, and the cost which you are losing, this difference is what we say dead weight welfare loss. What you are losing from your own pocket is found out from the difference between these two curves. They won't ask you to identify and figure it out what is the amount, but they might ask you to represent in the chart. So you need to know this is the amount of loss the private market competitors lose. Did you understand this? So when then we'll move on. So we have negative externality in consumption. So what is this negative externality in consumption? You might see that your private market benefit is lower than your, your social market benefit is lower than your private market benefit. As I already explained you on the previous calculation on positive externality in consumption, your social market benefit was higher. Here, they are not worried about the society. They are worried about the price what they can charge for the people. So they are worried about the profit. So what they do is they reduce the price, they give it to the society at maximum, but then the society is getting affected because the demand for the society is less, but the product is overly produced in the market. Now, when consumers are not demanding what type of products can be produced for the consumers over consumption of demand, most of the time, like goods which is not good for the humans society. So when a product is produced which is not good for a person's consumption, that type of product comes under negative externality of consumption. So now here what happens, your demand curve is surpassing your the earlier demand curve, which is social market benefit. So when private market benefit is exceeding by considering their profits, we say it as a loss towards the consumers because the consumers are only requesting at this point, but but suppliers are providing at this point to consume. So you might see the suppliers cost is very low than the private than the society's cost. You might see when society is enhancing to receive, they receive at a higher price, but when they are giving excess, people are not ready to take. When they still give excess, they will incur negative externality. Actually, a negative externality takes place when overconsumption of goods or resources are exploited. The private firms are not worried how much resource they produce. They want people to consume as much as they can. So here, what happens actually what happens? The private firms are not worried about the money actually they are incurring and the money they are actually making. They are worried about the profit they are going to make. They're not worried about society at large. So then moving on to the next part, negative externality in production. Here what they do is actually they are not so concerned about the society. Again, they are not worried about the society. They are worried about their cost. So what they will do is they will decrease the level of cost. You see that? So they want to decrease the level of cost and they want to give it at a lower cost to the environment. So people think, wow, it's so cheap, but they are actually affecting the environment. Now, for example, you take a carbonated drink company like cream soda is actually producing a drink, right? So once they produce a drink, when they supply it to the market, what they do when the product moves on to the market, the people who are consuming the product, they will feel okay, this product is so awesome. But actually, if those carbonated soft drinks company put the pollution to the nearest rivers, so the nearest rivers getting affected, people who are having a bath on the river, people who are having waters on the river is getting an affected reason, because they are putting all the chemicals to the nearby river because they don't want to dispose those chemicals somewhere else, or if they dispose that they need to pay a higher cost. So by considering their cost to reduce the cost, they're not worried about the society's cost. The moment they produce the product without worrying about the society, we say it as negative externality in production. So you need to understand one particular thing. SMC and PMC says that the private market cost is very less than the social market cost. When the society's market cost is not considered, they are producing in a way that they don't bother about what will happen to the society. We said as negative externality in production. Here, consumers are ready to buy at this price because it's very less. But when you see the society is lost, they are incurring a big loss. You see the demand curve, I mean supply curve from this point to this supply curve. The difference is what we say. Dead weight loss the society is actually losing. So in demand curve, you need to remember in negative externality of production or positive externality of production, the dead weight loss was represented in this way. You might see in positive externality of production on consumption, you had the dead weight loss on top, but on positive negative externality of consumption, you might see the dead weight loss in down part because your curves are intersecting in one another. Here you might say negative externality in production, the dead weight loss is up, and when you see positive externality of production, your dead weight loss is down. So knowing which side this will come and how it causes is one of the important thing you need to learn when you are attempting this. So to make yourself practice, you need to know how these curves actually work. And when you know how the curve actually works, then of course you can do better on your paper. So we learned four type of curves today. What are the four types of curves? Let me make it short and simple. Let me put here. What are the four curves we learned? Positive, external, and consumption. So what is positive, external, and consumption? When you are social market benefit is higher than your private market benefit, we say as positive external in consumption. Positive external in production says that your social market cost, your private market cost is higher than the social market cost. They will not affect the environment a greater way. What is negative externality of consumption in EC? We learn your private market benefit is higher than your social market benefit. Then we learn something, negative externality of production. Your private market, your social market cost is higher than your private market cost. So I hope you understood how this actually works. Now I have one more formula also to teach. So when you have your private cost and your social cost, these two together is creating what? It's creating externality. So these two can create actually externality. That's how it actually works. So please take this down the short notes. Then we have types of goods to classify today, how these goods actually work and how it can affect the environment. That's what we're gonna